The crystal vase glimmered like a captive star under the chandelier's light, each cut facet catching the glow and scattering it across the marble floor. It was the kind of vase that didn't just hold flowers, it announced wealth, power, and the kind of life most people could only dream about. And in Robert Carter's world, it was more than decoration. It was a statement, a trophy, a reminder of the perfection he demanded from everything and everyone around him. Anna stood at the far end of the living room, her bare feet sinking into the thick cream-colored rug. She had been folding a soft baby blanket, her hands moving, with slow, deliberate care, as though each fold might somehow protect the tiny life growing inside her. She wasn't prepared for the sharp sound of glass against wood as Robert's hand swept across the polished mahogany table, sending the vase spinning into the air. Time seemed to fracture. For a heartbeat she saw it turning, weightless, beautiful, in its rebellion against gravity. Then Robert's voice cut through the silence, low but sharp, like a blade sliding from its sheath. "You never listened to me." The vase hit the wall behind her with a sickening crack. Shards exploded outward, glittering as they tumbled to the ground. Some pieces bounced harmlessly onto the rug, others skittered across the marble like fleeing insects. Anna didn't scream. Her body froze, her mind trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the man she had once loved, the one who used to trace her jawline with gentle fingers, whispering promises of forever. Her right hand, almost on instinct, came to rest on her belly. She could feel the faintest flutter inside, like a tiny bird pressing against its shell. She swallowed hard, her throat dry, her mind screaming for her to move, to run, to do anything but stand there. But she was caught in the storm of his anger, caught between fear and disbelief, caught in the memory of better days that no longer existed. Robert stood in the center of the room, his expensive silk shirt slightly wrinkled, the top button undone as though he had been pacing, restless. His chest rose and fell in quick bursts, his jaw tight enough to crack. His eyes, once a warm hazel that had drawn her in years ago, were now hard and unyielding. There was something dangerous in them, not just anger, but the kind of rage that needed to break something to feel satisfied, the scent of fresh. Layla, her favorite, still lingered faintly from the vase's last arrangement, now mixing with the cold, sharp smell of shattered crystal. Somewhere deep inside, a part of Anna wanted to gather the broken pieces, to clean the mess before the shards cut into the rug or scratched the marble. But that part of her was the old Anna, the one who believed she could fix things if she just worked hard enough. That Anna was fading. Outside the massive bay windows, the city skyline shimmered against the dusk, unaware of the chaos inside the penthouse. Cars moved below like streams of light, people going about their evening routines, oblivious to the fact that, in this room, a life was being rewritten with every breath. Robert took a slow step toward her, the sound of his leather shoes on the marble echoing like a metronome in the vast space. "Do you think you can just ignore me?" His tone was controlled now, quieter, but somehow more dangerous than his earlier outburst. Anna's lips parted, but no words came. She felt her pulse. In her fingertips, in her ears, in the small of her back. She thought about the baby, about how every rise in her blood pressure, every jolt of fear, every ounce of stress could ripple through them both. She had promised herself she would protect this child at all costs. But protection was more than vitamins and doctor visits. It was safety, it was peace. It was something she no longer had here. The light from the chandelier danced on the remaining shards of the vase, tiny rainbows bending and refracting, mocking the perfection Robert had always demanded. She realized he hadn't just thrown the vase because he was angry. He had chosen it, he had aimed. It was a test, a warning, a display of control. The kind that said, "Look how close I can come without touching you. Look how much power I hold." In my hands, somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered, "He missed this time." Her legs wanted to step back, but her pride rooted her in place. If she moved, he would win. If she stayed, maybe, just maybe, he would see the line she was drawing in the sand, however faint. But that line was already blurred by fear. The air between them was thick, heavy with words unsaid and wounds invisible. She thought about how it had come to this moment. There had been subtle ones at first. The casual way he dismissed her opinions at dinners, the jokes that weren't really jokes. The way his hand would linger on her arm just a second, too long when she tried to walk away from an argument. Each moment was small enough to explain away, to forgive, to tuck into the shadows. Until now, the broken vase lay between them like a metaphor neither of them had to acknowledge. What had been whole, delicate, and full of life was now scattered, sharp and dangerous. And the question that pressed against her mind, louder than the pounding of her heart, was whether her marriage had just followed the same fate. She finally drew in a deep breath, steadying herself. The words weren't ready yet, but the decision was forming, solidifying with every heartbeat. She wasn't going to cry. Not yet, not in front of him. Not when the air still smelled like lilac and crystal dust. The chandelier's light swayed slightly, casting shifting shadows across Robert's face, making him look less like a man and more like something carved out of stone, beautiful, cold, and immovable. The silence stretched until it became unbearable, until it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Anna shifted her weight, her eyes never leaving his. If he saw fear there, so be it. If he saw defiance, even better. Because in that moment she understood something with crystal clarity. The vase had shattered, but so had the illusion that she was powerless. Something had changed tonight, something irreversible. And though Robert didn't know it yet, so had the balance of control in this house. Would you like me to now continue this story into the rising tension section with the same depth and intensity so it blends perfectly? That way, the pacing and emotion stay seamless. Robert's eyes stayed locked on her, unblinking, as if he were waiting for something, an apology, a flinch, some small surrender he could collect and keep like a trophy. The quiet in the room had a weight to it now, heavy and suffocating, the kind of silence that made every sound feel amplified. Anna could hear her own heartbeat, the faint hum of the city outside, even the tiny creak in the marble under his shifting stance. Every sense in her body was heightened, as though her instincts knew something was coming before her mind could catch up. She didn't move, but she could feel the energy in the room tilting, the air thickening. Robert took another step forward, slow and deliberate, his shoes leaving faint marks on the polished floor. His face was composed, almost eerily so, but his hands betrayed him, fingers twitching slightly, as if itching for another release. "Do you even hear me, Anna?" His voice was calm now, too calm, like the surface of still water hiding a dangerous current beneath. She opened her mouth, but the words she wanted to say dissolved before they could form. He thrived on reactions, he fed off them. She had learned that long ago. Every tear, every raised voice, every step back was a win for him. Tonight, she wasn't going to give him that. Robert glanced at the shattered glass at their feet, then back at her. "You think I won't do it again?" His tone wasn't a question, it was a promise wrapped in a warning. Anna's stomach tightened, her hand still instinctively resting against her belly. She felt a faint movement inside, like her child was shifting, sensing the unease. She thought about the baby's future, about the home they would grow up in if she stayed, and the thought made her chest ache in a way that was deeper than fear. It was grief for something that hadn't even happened yet. He closed the gap between them by another step. The scent of his cologne, rich, expensive, and overwhelming, hit her, mixing with the faint metallic tang of broken crystal. "You used to listen," he said, tilting his head slightly, almost studying her as though she were a puzzle that had stopped making sense. "You used to care what I thought?" Anna felt the urge to laugh, a bitter laugh that would slice through his words, but she swallowed it down. "I still care," she said quietly, her voice even. "Just not the way you want me to." His eyes narrowed. That small sentence, measured, deliberate, landed between them like a spark near dry kindling. The confetti cracked just enough for her to see the heat building beneath. He wasn't used to this version of her. She could tell, and it unnerved him. He glanced toward the kitchen, toward the set of expensive porcelain dishes neatly arranged in the glass cabinet. For a moment she thought he might grab one, send it flying like the vase. But he didn't. Instead he straightened. His posture smoothed the front of his shirt and smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You think this is about control?" he asked, his voice dropping lower. No, this is about respect. And you're losing yours. The word respect twisted in her ears. She wanted to tell him that respect wasn't demanded through fear, that it wasn't bought with gifts or enforced with threats. But she also knew that any answer she gave would only fan the flames. Her silence seemed to irritate him more than any insult could have. He stepped closer until only a couple of feet separated them. She could see the faint stubble along his jaw, the tightening of the skin around his mouth, the way his pupils had shrunk. Just slightly. Every detail felt etched into her memory in sharp relief. From the corner of her eye, she saw the front door, a sleek, modern panel of reinforced wood and glass. It might as well have been 100 miles away. She knew that if she made a move, for he'd notice instantly. Still, she filed it away in her mind, a quiet calculation. You've been distracted lately, he said, almost conversational now, but the edge in his voice was unmistakable. And I don't like distractions. Her hand moved from her belly to her side, fingers brushing the seam of her dress. The fabric was smooth beneath her fingertips, grounding her in the moment. She had a choice to make: keep standing her ground and risk pushing him over the edge, or back down and let him think he had won this round. She thought about the night he had first raised his voice in that way, the sharp, cutting tone that had shocked her into silence. That night, she'd told herself, it was stress, a bad day, an isolated moment. But moments had become patterns. And patterns had become a reality she could no longer deny. Robert leaned in slightly, his voice low enough that she could feel the vibration of it in her chest. I've given you everything, Anna. Everything. And this is how you repay me? Her eyes flicked to the floor where the shards still lay. The pieces glistened like tiny, dangerous stars scattered in the light. She realized something in that moment. His everything wasn't really for her. It was for him. Every gift, every trip, every grand gesture had been another way to tighten the invisible chains around her. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in. She could feel her own breath shortening, not from panic, but from the raw awareness of how fragile this balance had become. One wrong move, one wrong word, and the night could spiral into something neither of them could take back. Horn blared from the street below, startling her for a fraction of a second. Robert's eyes caught the flicker of movement in her face, and he smiled again. But this time it was different, less calculated, more triumphant, as if he had spotted a crack in her armor, but what he didn't realize was that the crack wasn't weakness, it was resolve finding its way through. Beneath the fear, something was growing, quiet and steady. She didn't know exactly when or how she would act on it, but she knew now that she would dot the distance between them wasn't just physical anymore. It was emotional, spiritual, a gap that no amount of control or intimidation could close. He might think he was winning in this moment, but Anna knew something he didn't. Storms don't last forever, and as his words kept coming, sharp and deliberate, she began to imagine what it would feel like when she finally stepped into the calm on the other side. If you want, I can now continue this scene into the climax section at the same 1,000-word emotional intensity, so the tension snaps in a powerful cinematic way. It will make the shift from this slow burn into a decisive turning point. Would you like me to do that next? The sound of sirens sliced through the heavy silence like a blade, growing louder until the flashing red and blue lights bathed the living room walls in a frantic strobe. Emma sat frozen on the couch, her hands trembling as she cradled her belly, the weight of what had just happened pressing on her like a storm cloud. The shattered pieces of the vase still littered the floor, glinting under the harsh ceiling light, like shards of a broken promise. Across the room, Daniel stood stiff, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths, the fire in his eyes replaced by something colder fear. The front door burst open, and 2 officers stepped in with authority. One immediately scanned the room, assessing the danger. The other's gaze locked on Emma, noting her pale face and the protective way she held herself. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" the taller officer asked, his tone clipped but gentle. She shook, her head slowly, still unable to find her voice. Her lips parted to speak, But the memory of the vase flying past her face made her throat tighten. Daniel stepped forward, his voice suddenly calm and measured, the way he used to sound in business meetings when closing billion-dollar deals. "This is a misunderstanding," he began, his hands raised slightly. "I didn't, sir." "Step away from her," the other officer interrupted firmly. Moving between him and Emma for a moment, Daniel hesitated. It wasn't defiance, it was calculation. He'd spent his life believing no one could touch him, that money and influence were armor thick enough to repel any consequence. But now, with uniforms in his home and Emma's wide eyes betraying the truth, the walls he'd built around himself seemed to crack. Emma finally found her voice, soft but shaking. "He didn't hit me, but he could have." She glanced at the broken vase, her chest tightening. "It missed by inches." The shorter officer crouched beside her, speaking low. "You and your baby's safety is our priority. Do you feel safe if he stays here tonight?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. She thought of the years they'd spent together, the charming man she'd met, the lavish life, the promises whispered late at night. But those promises had withered into sharp words and slammed doors. Tonight wasn't the first time something had been thrown. It was just the first time it came so close to ending everything. "No," she said finally, her voice breaking on. "The word, I don't." The officers moved with practiced efficiency. One read Daniel his rights while the other collected Emma's statement. Daniel's protests grew louder, his words sharper, but they no longer had the same weight. Every outburst seemed to confirm the truth Emma had been hiding from herself, that love twisted into control is not love at all. When the door shut behind them and the sirens faded into the night, Emma sat alone in the echo of the chaos. The room felt both empty and heavy. The broken vase lay in ruins on the floor, a perfect reflection of the life she was leaving behind. She bent slowly, picking up one jagged shard and turning it in her hand. It had once been beautiful, smooth, whole, and valuable. Now, no matter how carefully the pieces were gathered, it would never be the same. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her sister lit the screen. "I'm on my way. You're not alone." Emma's eyes welled with tears, but this time they weren't from fear, they were from relief. She realized she had been waiting for this moment, not the explosion, but the breaking point that would push her to step out of the shadows she'd been living in. As she leaned back against the couch, she whispered softly to the life inside her, "We're going to be okay." The words felt strange, but powerful, like she was speaking them into existence. She imagined a small apartment filled with warmth, laughter, and peace. She imagined mornings without shouting, nights without fear. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was one she could build, piece by piece, even if it meant starting from nothing. Outside, the street was quiet again, but inside Emma's heart, something new had begun, something stronger than fear, wealth, or control. For the first time in years, she felt free. And though the path ahead would not be easy, she knew that no amount of shattered glass could stop her from walking it. Would you like me to now rewrite all 3 sections together into one seamless, emotionally gripping short story so it flows like a cinematic narrative? That way, it could be ready for a video voiceover,